Sometimes, missing a train takes us exactly where we need to be. In the train to nowhere, a chance mistake derails the life of Sebastian, a driven CEO trapped in a world of ambition and solitude. A wrong train leads him to a quaint village where Phoebe, a kind-hearted nurse, shows him the beauty of simplicity and connection. What begins as a fleeting detour blossoms into a love that challenges everything he's known. But when duty pulls him back to the city, heartbreak and sacrifice follow. Will fate give them a second chance, or is their love destined to remain a memory? Join us for a journey of self-discovery and romance that proves happiness lies in the unexpected. If this resonates, hit that subscribe button and share where you're listening from in the comments. The city never slept, and neither did Sebastian Ward. At 38, he was a titan, the CEO of Apex Innovations, a tech empire that pulsed through the veins of global markets. His life was a symphony of precision, boardroom battles, curt emails, and deals that could topple economies. But beneath the tailored navy suit and the steely glint in his hazel eyes, there was a void, a hollow ache he'd long buried under ambition. His penthouse, perched atop a glass tower, was a shrine to success. Yet its silence mocked him each night as he ate alone, forks scraping against porcelain in a rhythm as mechanical as his days. This morning was no different. The sky was a bruise of gray, the air sharp with the promise of rain. Sebastian strode through the city's chaos, his leather briefcase swinging like a pendulum. His phone buzzed incessantly, analysts, investors, a protege eager to prove himself. He ignored it all, his mind locked on the deal awaiting him across the state, a merger that would cement Apex's dominance. The train station loomed ahead, a hive of commuters and clattering announcements. He glanced at his watch. 7:42 a.m. The express to New Haven left in 6 minutes. The platform was a blur of faces, briefcases, and coffee cups. Sebastian wove through the crowd, his polished shoes clicking against the tiles. His assistant's voice echoed in his head. Platform 3, 7:48. Don't be late. He scanned the signs, his pulse quickening as the seconds ticked down. A train waited ahead, its engine humming low, doors open like an invitation. He didn't pause to check the destination board. He didn't need to, or so he thought. With a final glance at his watch, he boarded, the doors hissing shut behind him. The carriage was wrong. Sebastian froze, his hand still gripping the rail. This wasn't the sleek, first-class express he knew, with its leather seats and Wi-Fi hum. The seats here were faded, upholstered in a mustard yellow fabric that smelled faintly of time. Wooden panels lined the walls, scuffed and worn, and the windows rattled with each lurch of the train. A few passengers, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman knitting, glanced up, their eyes lingering on the stranger in the crisp suit. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He'd made a mistake. He reached for his phone, thumbing the screen to call his assistant. No signal. He toggled the Wi-Fi. Nothing. A cold sweat prickled his neck. He was Sebastian Ward, a man who bent the world to his will. Yet here he was, unmoored, on a train he didn't choose. He sank into a seat, the cushions sagging under his weight, and forced himself to breathe. The train chugged forward, its rhythm slow, almost mocking. Outside, the city's jagged skyline dissolved into smears of green fields, hills, and a horizon that stretched too wide. "Where the hell am I going?" he muttered, his voice low but sharp. The elderly man across the aisle looked up, his eyes crinkling with amusement, but said nothing. Sebastian's fingers drummed against his briefcase, a habit born of impatience. He tried to piece it together. The express to New Haven was a 2-hour ride, a straight shot. This train, with its creaks and groans, felt like it belonged to another era. He leaned toward the window, searching for a station sign, but the landscape offered no clues, only endless meadows and the occasional cluster of rooftops, sleepy and serene. The serenity grated on him. Sebastian thrived on chaos, on the adrenaline of outsmarting rivals and closing deals. This stillness, this nothingness, was an affront. He closed his eyes, willing his mind to focus. The merger, the numbers, the stakes. But his thoughts were scattered, interrupted by the train's relentless clatter and the faint, unfamiliar scent of wildflowers drifting through a cracked window. He hadn't noticed wildflowers in years. Not since he was a boy, before the world demanded he become unbreakable. Hours passed, or so it seemed. The train slowed, its brakes screeching like a wounded animal. Sebastian straightened, peering out as a station came into view. The platform was small, weathered, with a single sign swaying in the breeze. Willow Creek. The name meant nothing to him. The doors opened, and a cool, clean breeze swept in, carrying the scent of earth and pine. He stood, briefcase in hand, and stepped onto the platform, his shoes absurdly loud against the quiet. The town beyond was a postcard come to life. Cobblestone streets curved past shops, painted in soft pastels, their windows glowing with warmth. A bakery's sign promised fresh bread, and laughter spilled from a nearby park where children chased a dog. Locals moved with an unhurried grace, some nodding at Sebastian with curious smiles. He felt like an alien, his suit a glaring anomaly in this world of flannel and denim. His phone still showed no bars, no lifeline to his empire. For the first time in years, Sebastian Ward was utterly alone, not just in body, but in spirit. He took a step forward, then another, drawn by the town's strange pull. The merger, the deal, the life he'd built. They all felt distant, like a dream fading at dawn. Something was happening, something he couldn't name. As he walked, a loose cobblestone caught his shoe, and he stumbled, a sharp pain flaring in his knee. He cursed under his breath, steadying himself, unaware that this moment, this wrong train, this quiet town, was the first thread in a tapestry that would unravel everything he thought he knew. Sebastian Ward stood on the uneven cobblestones of Willow Creek, his knee throbbing from the fall, his suit a glaring misfit against the town's soft palate. The air was crisp, laced with the scent of pine and fresh bread, a stark contrast to the city's smog. His phone remained a useless brick in his pocket, no signal, no tether to the empire he'd built. The train that had dumped him here was long gone, and the station's timetable, scrawled in fading chalk, mocked him. No departures until dawn. He was trapped, a man of precision marooned in a place where time seemed to pause. The town pulsed with a quiet vitality. Shopkeepers swept their stoops, children darted through a park, and an old man tipped his hat as he passed, his smile unguarded. Sebastian's instinct was to retreat, to find a corner to strategize his escape, but his stomach growled and his scraped knee burned. He needed a plan, or at least a bandage. He took a step, wincing, and that's when she appeared. "You're not from around here, are you?" The voice was warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Sebastian turned to find a young woman standing a few paces away, her fair skin glowing under the afternoon's golden light. She was slight, with dark hair spilling over her shoulders and eyes that held a quiet curiosity. A nurse's satchel hung at her side, its leather worn but sturdy. She knelt before he could respond, inspecting his knee with a practiced eye. "That's a nasty scrape. Sit, let me fix it." Sebastian hesitated. He wasn't used to being cared for, let alone by a stranger. But the pain and her steady gaze left little room for protest. He lowered himself onto a nearby bench, the wood creaking under his weight. "I'm fine," he muttered. But she was already pulling gauze and antiseptic from her bag. Her hands moved with a gentle efficiency, cleaning the wound without flinching at his grimace. "I'm Phoebe," she said, not looking up, "and you look like you've never seen a cobblestone in your life." A teasing lilt danced in her voice, disarming him. He opened his mouth to retort, Sebastian Ward, CEO, didn't take kindly to being mocked. But her smile stopped him. It was unguarded, free of the calculation he knew too well. "Sebastian," he said instead, the word feeling oddly raw. Phoebe finished bandaging his knee, her touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "There. You'll live." She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. "First time in Willow Creek?" He nodded, glancing at the town's pastel storefronts and the river glinting in the distance. "I didn't plan to be here. Wrong train." Her laugh was soft, like a melody. "Happens more than you'd think. Come on, I'll show you around. You're stuck till morning anyway." He should have declined. He had emails to draft, a merger to salvage, a world waiting for his command. But something in her ease, her lack of awe at his polished exterior, pulled him along. They walked, Phoebe pointing out the town's heartbeat. The bakery where she'd filched scones as a child, the oak tree scarred with lovers' initials, the bridge where the river sang its endless song. Locals waved, some offering curious glances at the city stranger, others pressing warm bread into his hands with no expectation of repayment. Their warmth was alien, a language Sebastian had forgotten. "Your world's different," he said, breaking the comfortable silence as they paused by a flower stall bursting with color. Phoebe tilted her head, studying him. "Different how?" He gestured at the town, the people, the unhurried rhythm. No rush, no edge. She smiled, plucking a daisy and tucking it into her hair. "Maybe you're the different one, Sebastian. Ever think of that?" The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through him. He was different, forged in boardrooms, sharpened by ambition. Yet here, under Willow Creek's gentle gaze, he felt exposed, a man out of place. Phoebe didn't wait for his response. She led him to a cafe, its sign reading The Hearth, where the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Inside, patrons chatted over steaming mugs, their laughter a soft hum. Phoebe ordered 2 teas, sliding one to him with a grin. "Relax, city boy. The world won't end if you sit still for 5 minutes." He took the mug, its warmth seeping into his palms. For the first time that day, his shoulders loosened, the knot in his chest easing. Phoebe leaned forward, her eyes bright. "So, what's your story? Nobody ends up here by accident." He stiffened, the question too close to truths he didn't share. "Business," he said curtly. "A deal. Doesn't matter now." Her gaze held his, unflinching, as if she saw past the armor he wore. "Maybe it matters less than you think." The cafe's clock ticked softly, marking time in a way that felt foreign. No deadlines, no urgency. Outside, the sun dipped, casting long shadows over the cobblestones. Sebastian sipped his tea, the bittersweet flavor grounding him. Phoebe's presence was a quiet force, her ease chipping at the walls he'd built. He didn't know why, but he wanted to stay in this moment, in this town, just a little longer. As they stepped back into the street, the first stars blinking above, he felt the stirrings of something new, a crack in the life he'd known, a glimpse of a path he hadn't dared imagine. The stars blinked awake above Willow Creek, their light dusting the cobblestone streets as Sebastian followed Phoebe from the hearth. The tea's warmth lingered in his hands, but it was her presence, her effortless ease, thawed something deeper, a part of him long frozen by ambition. The town was alive tonight, its pulse quickening with the hum of an approaching festival. Lanterns swayed from lampposts, casting golden pools that danced with the breeze. Sebastian's suit felt heavier with each step, a relic of a world that seemed farther away by the minute. Phoebe's stride was light, her dark hair catching the starlight as she glanced back at him. "You're not bailing on me now, are you, city boy?" Her teasing grin sparked a rare chuckle from him, a sound that felt foreign, yet freeing. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, surprised by his sincerity. The weight of his briefcase, abandoned at the cafe, was gone, and with it, the tether to his empire. For the first time in years, Sebastian was untethered, adrift in a moment that demanded nothing but his presence. They wove through the town square, where the festival was unfolding like a living tapestry. Stalls, brimmed with handmade trinkets and steaming pies, their aromas mingling with the sharp tang of cider. Children darted past, clutching sparklers that trailed light like comets. A fiddler's tune floated from a corner, its notes weaving through the crowd's laughter. Locals greeted Phoebe with warm embraces, their eyes lingering on Sebastian with a mix of curiosity and welcome. An elderly woman pressed a caramel apple into his hand, her smile crinkling her face. "Enjoy the night, stranger," she said, and he nodded, the gesture awkward but genuine. Phoebe led him to a clearing where townsfolk gathered, their faces glowing under strings of fairy lights. "This is our lantern festival," she explained, her voice soft with pride. "We light them to send wishes to the stars." She handed him a paper lantern, its delicate frame trembling in his hands. Sebastian stared at it, the fragility of the moment catching him off guard. In his world, wishes were contracts, signed and sealed. Here, they were fleeting, trusted to the sky. "Make a wish," Phoebe urged, her eyes bright with anticipation. He hesitated, his mind blank. What did a man like him wish for? More power? Another deal? The thoughts felt hollow, out of place. He glanced at her, at the town's warmth, and something stirred, a longing for something simpler, something real. He didn't voice it, but as he lit the lantern and watched it rise, joining hundreds of others in a glowing constellation, he felt a quiet hope take root. The crowd erupted in cheers as fireworks burst overhead, painting the night in crimson and gold. Sebastian's gaze drifted to Phoebe, her face illuminated by the explosions, her laughter blending with the crackle of sparks. She caught his eye, and for a moment, the world shrank to just them. The noise, the lights, the weight of his life all fading. Her smile was an anchor, grounding him in a way he hadn't known he needed. "Not bad for a small town, huh?" she said, nudging him. He grinned, a rare, unguarded expression. "Not bad at all." They wandered to a riverside bench, the festival's energy humming in the distance. The water reflected the fading fireworks, its surface rippling with each burst. Phoebe sat close, her shoulder brushing his, and the contact sent a jolt through him. "You're different here," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Less severe." He raised an eyebrow. "Severe?" She laughed, unapologetic. "You walked in like you were ready to conquer the place. Now look at you, almost human." Her words cut, but not cruelly. They were a mirror, reflecting a truth he'd avoided. He was severe, forged by years of control, of burying anything that softened him. Yet here, with her, he felt the edges of that armor fraying. "Maybe it's the company," he said, his voice low. Her eyes met his, searching, and he wondered what she saw, the CEO or the man beneath. "Maybe," she replied, a smile playing at her lips. "Or maybe Willow Creek's working its magic." The festival wound down, but the night felt alive, charged with possibility. Phoebe stood, offering her hand. One last stop. He took it, her palm warm against his, and followed her to a hill overlooking the town. From there, Willow Creek was a mosaic of light and shadow, its rooftops cradled by hills. She sat in the grass, patting the spot beside her. "Best view in town," she said. He joined her, the ground cool beneath him, and for the first time, he didn't care about the wrinkles in his suit. They talked about her childhood chasing fireflies, his fleeting memory of stargazing as a boy. The conversation flowed effortlessly, each word peeling back another layer of the walls he'd built. As the last firework faded, leaving only the stars, Sebastian felt something shift. It wasn't just the town or the festival, it was her. Phoebe, with her quiet strength and unguarded heart, was rewriting the rules of his world. He didn't know what came next, but as they sat under the vast sky, he knew one thing: he wasn't ready to leave. The stars hung low over Willow Creek, their light a fragile veil over the sleeping town. Sebastian sat beside Phoebe on the hill, the grass cool beneath him, her quiet laughter still echoing in his ears. The festival's glow lingered in the distance, a fading ember of a night that had cracked open something inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't counting minutes or strategizing moves. He was simply here, tethered to the moment by a woman whose warmth felt like a lifeline. But the world he'd left behind was never far, and its shadow was about to fall. Phoebe stood, brushing grass from her skirt, her silhouette sharp against the starlit sky. "Come on," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "There's one last place you need to see." He followed her down the hill, their footsteps hushed on the cobblestones. She led him to a small guest house, its windows aglow with lamplight. "You'll need a place to crash," she said, nodding toward the door. "Mrs. Harrow's the best host in town." Sebastian hesitated, the reality of his situation creeping back. He was stranded, yes, but tomorrow he'd return to his life, his empire, his battles. The thought felt heavier than it should. Inside, the guest house was a cocoon of warmth, its walls lined with faded photographs and quilts draped over armchairs. Mrs. Harrow, a stout woman with a kind smile, handed him a key and a mug of chamomile tea. "Rest well, dear," she said, her eyes twinkling as if she knew more than she let on. Phoebe lingered by the door, her expression unreadable. "See you at dawn?" she asked. He nodded, his throat tight. "Dawn," he echoed. But the word felt like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Sleep eluded him. The room was cozy, the bed soft, but Sebastian's mind churned. The festival, Phoebe's smile, the lantern he'd sent skyward, they haunted him, their simplicity clashing with the life awaiting him. He rose before dawn, the pendant Phoebe had given him heavy in his pocket, its carved surface pressed against his palm, a reminder of a night that felt like a dream. He needed to know when the next train left. Stepping into the quiet street, he spotted a radio shop, its sign barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. The shopkeeper, an old man with a face like weathered oak, was tuning a battered radio when Sebastian entered. "Need to check the news," he said, his voice clipped, the CEO resurfacing. The man nodded, twisting the dial until static gave way to a broadcaster's voice. What came next hit Sebastian like a fist. Apex Innovations in turmoil. CEO Sebastian Ward is presumed missing after failing to appear for a critical merger. Sources say his protege, Daniel Holt, is poised to assume control. The words blurred, drowned by the roar in his ears. Missing, presumed dead. His empire, his life's work, was slipping through his fingers. He stumbled outside, the cold air biting his face. Willow Creek was still asleep, its charm now a cruel contrast to the chaos erupting in his world. He had to get back now. The merger, the company, his legacy, they demanded him. But as he hurried toward the station, Phoebe's face flashed in his mind, her laughter a tether he wasn't ready to cut. The station was empty, the timetable confirming a train at 6 a.m. He had an hour. His phone, still useless, felt like a shackle in his pocket. Phoebe was waiting by the platform, her nurse's satchel slung over her shoulder. The dawn painted her in soft pinks, but her eyes were clouded, as if she sensed the storm in him. "You're leaving," she said, not a question. He nodded, the words catching in his throat. "Something's come up. My company. It's falling apart." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, hand-carved pendant, its surface etched with a delicate spiral. "For the road," she said, pressing it into his hand. Her fingers lingered, warm against his. "All right," he said, the promise sounding hollow even to him. Her smile was small, tinged with sadness. "You don't have to," she replied. "Just don't forget what you felt here." The words pierced him, exposing the crack in his armor. He wanted to stay, to cling to the peace she'd shown him. But the radio's words echoed, missing, control. His world was calling, and he couldn't ignore it. The train's whistle cut through the dawn, its rumble shaking the platform. Phoebe stepped back, her gaze steady but distant. "Safe travels, Sebastian," she said, and the finality in her voice twisted something inside him. He boarded, the pendant burning in his pocket, and found a seat by the window. As the train pulled away, he watched her figure shrink, the town's pastel rooftops fading into the mist. The serenity of Willow Creek was gone, replaced by the cold steel of the city awaiting him. He leaned back, the pendant's weight a quiet accusation. He'd promised to write, but already the demands of his empire were clawing at him, pulling him back to the man he'd always been. The crack in his armor was there, but the world he knew was relentless, and he wasn't sure he could resist its pull. The city swallowed Sebastian Ward whole, its steel and glass jaws snapping shut the moment he stepped off the train. The air was thick with exhaust, the skyline a jagged cage that blocked out the stars he'd watched with Phoebe in Willow Creek. The pendant she'd given him lay buried in his pocket, its weight a faint pulse against the chaos of his world. He'd promised to write, but the words felt distant, drowned by the roar of Apex Innovation's crisis. The news had been merciless. His absence had sparked rumors of his death, and Daniel Holt, his ambitious protege, was circling like a vulture, ready to seize the throne. Sebastian stormed into his office, the glass tower humming with urgency. His team scrambled, their faces pale under the fluorescent lights. The merger he'd missed was crumbling, investors were pulling out, and Daniel's smooth assurances to the board had sown doubt in Sebastian's leadership. He barked orders, his voice a blade cutting through the panic. Meetings blurred into nights, spreadsheets and contracts piling like bricks around him. The man who'd laughed under Willow Creek's fireworks was gone, replaced by the CEO forged in fire, relentless, unyielding. To save Apex, he needed a lifeline. Enter Catherine Langley, the poised daughter of a key investor whose capital could steady the sinking ship. Over a tense dinner, her father laid out the terms, a merger of companies, sealed by a marriage. Catherine was elegant, her smile calculated, her eyes devoid of the warmth Sebastian had glimpsed in Phoebe. She was a perfect fit for his world, a partner in strategy, not sentiment. "It's business," she said, her voice cool as she raised her wineglass. He nodded, the agreement a chain locking around his heart. The pendant stayed in a drawer, untouched, its spiral etching a silent rebuke. Weeks bled into a month, each day a grind of negotiations and power plays. Sebastian's promise to write Phoebe faded, buried under the weight of survival. He told himself it was for the best. Willow Creek was a dream, not his reality. But at night, in the sterile silence of his penthouse, her laughter haunted him, sharp and vivid against the city's hum. He pushed it down, focusing on the empire he was clawing back. Apex was stabilizing, Catherine's ring glinting on her finger like a contract signed in blood. Then, one gray morning, a figure appeared in the lobby of Apex's headquarters. Phoebe stood there, her simple dress and nurse's satchel stark against the marble and chrome. The city's clamor had overwhelmed her, its honking cabs, its indifferent crowds, but she'd come, driven by a heart that refused to let go. She'd waited for his letter, for any sign, until hope pushed her onto a train to find him. Now, clutching the pendant he'd left behind, she scanned the faces streaming from the elevators, her pulse racing. Sebastian emerged from a meeting, his suit impeccable, his expression carved from stone. Their eyes met across the crowded lobby, and for a heartbeat, time stopped. Phoebe's face lit up, a fragile spark of joy. "Sebastian!" she called, her voice trembling with hope, cutting through the corporate din. His chest tightened, the pendant's memory burning in his mind. He saw her, the woman who'd shown him a world where he could breathe, and for a moment, he wanted to run to her, to beg forgiveness for the silence that had stretched between them. But then Catherine appeared, her arm slipping through his with practiced ease. Her diamond ring caught the light, a reminder of the deal that tethered him. The board was watching, the investors waiting, his empire hanging by a thread. Phoebe's call echoed in his ears, a plea he couldn't answer. He turned away, his jaw clenched, forcing his gaze to the floor. The lobby's noise swallowed her voice, but not the image of her face, hope crumbling into devastation. Phoebe stood frozen, the pendant biting into her palm. Catherine's proprietary touch, Sebastian's cold dismissal. It was a knife to her heart. The city, with its towering indifference, closed in around her. She'd been a fool to think she could belong here, to believe he'd meant his promise. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled toward the exit, the pendant now a weight of betrayal. The train station beckoned, its platforms, a path back to Willow Creek, to a world where she'd never fit in. Sebastian felt her absence like a physical blow, though he didn't turn back. Catherine's chatter about the upcoming gala was a drone, meaningless against the ache in his chest. He'd chosen apex, chosen survival, but the cost was carving him hollow. In his office, he sank into his chair, the city sprawling beyond the window, like a battlefield he'd won, but lost. The pendant lay in its drawer, a relic of a life he'd tasted and abandoned. He told himself it was necessary, that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But as the city's lights flickered on, cold and unyielding, he wondered if he'd just made the greatest mistake of his life. Phoebe clutched the pendant in her trembling hand, its carved spiral biting into her palm as the train rattled away from the city. The glass towers and honking cabs faded behind her, but the image of Sebastian's cold dismissal burned in her mind. His averted gaze, Catherine's possessive arm, the diamond ring glinting like a blade. She'd come to him with hope, a fragile bridge built on memories of lanterns and laughter, only to watch it collapse under the weight of his silence. The city had no place for her, and neither, it seemed, did he. Willow Creek was her refuge, but it felt like a hollow home now, its warmth tainted by betrayal. The train's rhythm was a cruel echo of the one that had brought Sebastian to her life. She pressed her forehead against the cool window, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. The pendant, once a symbol of connection, was now a shard of broken promises. She'd believed in him, in the man who'd softened under Willow Creek's stars, but that man was a mirage, swallowed by the city's chains. "Fool," she whispered to herself, the word bitter on her tongue. She tucked the pendant into her pocket, vowing to bury it with the memories it held. Willow Creek greeted her with its familiar embrace. Cobblestone streets, the river's gentle song, the bakery's warm glow. But the town's magic felt dimmed, its colors muted by the ache in her chest. She slipped into her small cottage, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and solitude. Her nurse's satchel hit the floor with a thud, and she sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling where she'd once dreamed of a life beyond these hills. Sebastian's laugh, his rare smile, they haunted her, ghosts of a night that had promised more. She curled into herself, willing sleep to dull the pain, but the pendant's weight in her pocket kept her tethered to the hurt. Miles away, Sebastian sat in his penthouse, the city's lights sprawling beyond his window like a constellation of regrets. The pendant lay on his desk, its spiral catching the lamplight, a silent accusation. Catherine's gala plans droned in the background, her voice a polished hum he barely registered. He'd saved Apex, outmaneuvered Daniel Holt, and secured the merger with Catherine's father. The board applauded, the investors returned, but the victory was ashes in his mouth. Each night, when the city's hum faded, Phoebe's face filled the silence, her hopeful call, her shattered expression as he turned away. He'd chosen duty, but the cost was carving him hollow. He rose, pacing the sterile expanse of his apartment. The pendant gleamed, a relic of a world where he'd felt alive. He remembered the festival's fireworks, the warmth of her hand, the way her laughter had loosened the knots in his soul. He'd meant to write, to explain, but the city's demands had consumed him, each day a step further from the man she'd seen in him. Now, he wondered if she'd burned his memory, if Willow Creek had closed its heart to him as he'd closed his to her. The thought was a knife, twisting deeper with each sleepless hour. Sebastian opened the drawer, his fingers brushing the pendant. He could still feel her touch, the moment she'd pressed it into his hand at the station. "Don't forget what you felt here," she'd said, her voice a quiet plea. But he had forgotten or worse, he'd chosen to. He'd traded her warmth for Catherine's cold alliance, her authenticity for a deal that left him richer, but emptier. He sank into a chair, the city's skyline a mocking backdrop. For the first time, Sebastian Ward, the man who bent the world to his will, felt powerless. Not against his empire, but against the heart he'd left behind. In Willow Creek, dawn broke over the hills, painting the town in soft golds. Phoebe rose, her eyes heavy but resolute. She donned her nurse's uniform, forcing herself back to routine. The townsfolk welcomed her with gentle smiles, sensing her quiet sorrow, but asking no questions. She tended to scraped knees and fevers, her hands steady despite the storm within. The pendant stayed in her pocket, a weight she couldn't yet discard. She told herself she'd heal. That time would dull the ache. But each glimpse of the oak tree or the river stirred memories she couldn't outrun. Sebastian's days blurred into boardroom battles, but his nights belonged to regret. He avoided Catherine's gaze, her touch a reminder of the lie he lived. The pendant became his secret ritual, a touchstone he held when the world slept. He imagined Phoebe in Willow Creek, her laughter filling the square, her kindness mending more than wounds. He'd broken something precious, and the realization was a slow poison. He didn't know how to fix it, or if he could. But as the city's chains tightened, one truth grew clear. He couldn't keep running from the man he'd been with her. The question was whether he'd find the courage to face it before it was too late. The city's pulse thrummed through Sebastian Ward's veins, but it was a hollow rhythm, each beat echoing the emptiness he'd carved within himself. The pendant from Phoebe sat on his desk, its spiral etching glinting under the sterile glow of his penthouse lamp. Nights had become a battleground, his mind replaying her shattered expression in the Apex lobby, her voice calling his name. He'd buried himself in work, in Catherine's calculated plans, but the victory of saving his empire felt like defeat. Willow Creek was a distant memory, yet its pull grew stronger, a tide dragging him toward a truth he couldn't outrun. Dawn broke, gray and unforgiving, as Sebastian scrolled through news alerts on his phone. A headline stopped his breath. Train derailment, outside city leaves. Several injured. The details were sparse. A rural route, a female passenger, critical condition. His hands shook, the phone slipping in his grip. It couldn't be her, not Phoebe. But the pendant seemed to pulse, a warning he couldn't ignore. He dialed hospitals, his voice sharp with urgency, each call a desperate thread cast into the unknown. The city's main trauma center confirmed it. A young woman, a nurse, head injuries, ICU. His heart plummeted. The hospital was a maze of antiseptic corridors and muted grief. Sebastian pushed through, his suit incongruous among the weary families and harried staff. He found her in a sterile room, tubes snaking from her pale arms, bandages wrapped tightly around her head. Phoebe's face, once radiant under Willow Creek's stars, was bruised and still, her breathing a faint whisper against the machine's hum. He sank into a chair beside her, the pendant clutched in his fist. "Please," he whispered, the word raw, a plea to a universe he'd never trusted. Guilt clawed at him. He'd pushed her away, sent her back to this fate. He stayed through the day, ignoring Catherine's calls and the board's demands. The doctors spoke of brain trauma, of uncertain outcomes, their words a fog he barely grasped. Surgery was scheduled, a grueling wait that stretched into dusk. He held vigil, the pendant his only anchor. Its weight, a reminder of the night he'd felt alive. Memories flooded him. Her laughter at the festival, her hand brushing his under the stars, her quiet strength that had cracked his armor. He'd chosen Apex over her, and now she lay here, a cost he hadn't foreseen. The surgery stretched into the night, each tick of the clock a hammer against his resolve. When the doctor emerged, exhaustion etched into her face, she offered cautious hope. Phoebe had survived, but her recovery was uncertain. Sebastian returned to her side, her hand cool in his. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a fragile thread. The question was a blade slicing through him. He forced a smile, his chest tight. "Just a stranger," he lied, the words ash on his tongue. He couldn't bear to stir her pain, not when he'd caused so much. He placed the pendant on her bedside table, its spiral catching the dim light. "Be happy," he whispered, stepping back, his heart fracturing. He stumbled into the hospital's cold corridor, the weight of his choices crushing him. He'd lost her, not just to the accident, but to his cowardice. The city loomed outside, its lights indifferent. A world he'd fought for, but no longer wanted. He drove aimlessly, the pendant's absence a void in his pocket. By morning, he was back at his penthouse, staring at the skyline that had once defined him. The phone rang, Catherine's name flashing on the screen. He answered, bracing for her usual polish, but her voice was different, calm, resolute. "I saw you at the hospital," she said, no trace of her usual calculation. "You love her, Sebastian, not me." He froze, the truth laid bare. "I can't keep you in a deal that's killing you," she continued. "The engagement's off. My father will honor the merger. He respects you too much to pull out. Go to her. Be free." The line went silent and Sebastian stood, stunned. Catherine, the woman he'd seen as a partner in strategy, had given him a gift he didn't deserve. Freedom, not from Apex, but from the chains he'd forged himself. The release was bittersweet, shadowed by Phoebe's fragile state. He returned to the hospital, lingering outside her room, afraid to face her blank gaze again. The pendant still sat by her bed, untouched, a relic of a love he'd failed to protect. He didn't know if she'd ever remember him, or if she'd want to. But Catherine's words echoed, "Be free." For the first time, Sebastian saw a path forward, not as the CEO, not as the man bound by duty, but as someone who could choose love, even if it meant starting from ashes. Phoebe, still tethered to machines, stirred in her sleep, her fingers brushing the pendant. A flicker of something, memory, instinct, crossed her face, but it faded as quickly as it came. Sebastian watched from the doorway, his heart a tangle of hope and fear. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He couldn't run anymore. The truth had cost him everything, but it had also shown him what mattered. Now, he had to find the courage to fight for it. Phoebe lay in the hospital bed, the city's distant hum seeping through the window, like a stranger's whisper. The bandages around her head were gone, replaced by a faint scar tracing her temple, a silent mark of the train crash that had nearly claimed her. Her body was healing, But her mind was a fractured mosaic, pieces of memory scattered like leaves in a storm. The pendant on her bedside table gleamed under the fluorescent light, its spiral etching a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, drawn by an instinct deeper than thought. The inscription, "I'll love you always," stirred something within her, a flicker of warmth amidst the fog. Days had passed since the stranger's visit, the man with haunted eyes who'd called himself just a stranger. Yet his presence lingered, a shadow in her dreams. Phoebe turned the pendant over, its weight familiar, grounding. Images flashed, lanterns floating skyward, fireworks painting the night. A man's rare smile under Willow Creek's stars. Sebastian. The name surfaced like a tide, pulling memories with it. His laugh, his hand in hers. The pain of his rejection in the city's cold lobby. Tears welled as the truth crystallized. She'd loved him, and he'd broken her. But why had he been here, watching over her? In his penthouse, Sebastian stood at the window, the city's lights a glittering cage he no longer belonged to. Catherine's decision to end their engagement had unshackled him. But freedom was a bitter gift when Phoebe lay in a hospital bed, her memory of him erased. He'd visited daily, lingering outside her room, afraid to face her blank gaze. The pendant, left as a silent apology, was all he could offer. A fragile hope she might remember the man he'd been before duty tore them apart. Apex was stable, his empire secure, but it meant nothing without her. He'd chosen wrong once. He wouldn't again. Phoebe's recovery gained strength, her steps steadier, her mind clearer. The hospital released her on a crisp morning, the air sharp with autumn's bite. She clutched the pendant, its inscription a lifeline to the past she was piecing together. The city overwhelmed her, its crowds, its noise. But she refused to return to Willow Creek, not yet. She needed answers, needed to understand why Sebastian had stayed by her side, only to vanish. The pendant was a clue, a thread she followed blindly, her heart a compass in the urban sprawl. Sebastian, meanwhile, haunted the hospital's corridors, hoping for a glimpse of her. The nurses said she was recovering, but no one mentioned memory. He feared she'd forgotten him for good, a punishment he deserved. Yet, he couldn't stay away. He took to wandering the city, his polished suits traded for a simple jacket, his eyes scanning every face for her. The skyline, once his kingdom, felt hollow, its towers mocking the empire he'd valued over love. He needed her forgiveness, her presence, even if it meant starting from nothing. Their paths converged on a bustling avenue, the city's heart pulsing with life. Phoebe stood at a crosswalk, the pendant dangling from her neck, her gaze lost in the crowd. She felt him before she saw him, a pull, like gravity. Across the street, Sebastian froze, his breath catching. Her face, framed by dark hair, was a beacon in the chaos. The scar on her temple was faint, but her eyes held a spark of recognition that stopped his heart. She remembered. Or did she? He took a step, then another, the crowd parting like a sea. "Phoebe," he called, his voice raw, carrying over the city's din. Her head turned, and their eyes locked, time collapsing in that single glance. She clutched the pendant, tears brimming as memories flooded back. The festival, the hill, the pain, the love. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice trembling. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat, pulling her into his arms, the world fading around them. "I'm so sorry," he said, his words breaking. "I was a fool. I'll never leave you again." She pulled back, her eyes searching his, the hurt still raw. "You chose her," she said, the words a quiet wound. "You chose that world." He shook his head, his grip tightening. "I chose wrong. I thought I had to, for Apex, for duty. But it's nothing without you." His voice cracked, vulnerability spilling free. "You showed me what matters, your world, Our world. Let me prove it. Phoebe hesitated, the pendant warm against her chest. The city's clamor pressed in, but his warmth, his sincerity, anchored her. "We're different, Sebastian," she said softly. "Can we make it work?" He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her scar. "We'll build something new together. No empires, no chains. Just us." The promise was a vow, etched in the air between them. Under the avenue's bright lights, they embraced. The city, a backdrop to their rebirth. The pendant gleamed, its inscription a truth they'd both reclaimed. They'd lost each other once, but now, hand in hand, they swore to hold tight, to craft a life of love, laughter, and the simple moments that made it whole. The train to nowhere had led them here, to a promise kept, a future theirs to shape. As Sebastian and Phoebe's story fades into the city's glow, we're reminded that sometimes the wrong path leads to the right destination. What did their journey stir in you? Did it spark memories of your unexpected detours or loves worth fighting for? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this tale touched your heart. A huge thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until next time, keep chasing the moments that make life truly yours. See you soon.